What's going on, everybody? Welcome to part one of a two-part thing. I don't want to call it a video. While this is a video, part two is actually going to be a live stream, and I'm going to get into the details of that live stream here in just a little bit. But what we're going to be doing is, over the last couple of weeks, I've been tinkering around with the side scroller template in Unreal Engine. And while I did just start out playing around with the template, I ended up making a small level. I don't want to call it a game because it's not a game, but I did set up a scene and set some really cool things up to work throughout the level. And so really what I wanted to do was I wanted to showcase start to finish what I do with audio, whether I'm making the project or somebody gives me a project to work on, just kind of how I take a look at the project, identify the sounds that need to be created, the editing process, and then finally the live stream portion is going to be implementing all those sounds directly into Unreal Engine without the use of middleware. So without further ado, let's jump into it. All right, so we're here in Unreal Engine, and like I said, I just built a small level. And so just to kind of give you an overview of this side scroller level that I created, there's not a lot to it. We've just got a couple rooms, and kind of has like a sci-fi futuristic feel to it, and that's it. The end. Like I said, it's super short. It's only 4 rooms, and before anybody gives me grief about my lighting, I'm garbage at lighting in Unreal Engine. So let's just go ahead and hit play, and I'll show you the level real quick, and then we'll start talking about kind of what I do to identify sounds in a project. So we've got our robot character here, and like I said, it's a side scroller, so you just run and you do the things that whatever the level's set up to do. And like I said, right now there's no audio in the game because that's what we're going to be doing during the live stream. And then once he goes up the elevator, the level starts over. You could have that go to another level. You could have it, do whatever, and go to a cutscene. But I just wanted to build something small. So right off the bat, one of the first things that I notice when kind of pulling sounds from a project, it's really great if I'm working on a game and I actually have the game to play. Sometimes I just have videos. In this instance, since we have the project, we can kind of play around with it. We can see different things, see how everything works. So right off the bat, obviously we're going to want some background noise. So adding to the list, we're going to get some kind of spaceship ambience. We're going to try and find some background music as well that kind of fits the feel of this level. And because we have a character that's running, we're going to need some footsteps. And anytime I have footsteps, I look at the feet of the character, obviously, and the material that they're running on. Now, because this is a spaceship, everything is, and it's a robot, it's going to be kind of metallic. So that's going to be a little easier for us when we grab footstep sounds. I put some objects in the way just to kind of, give a little variation to it. So we're going to need a jump and a land sound as well. And moving right along, I've got the doors triggered on my E key. They open up. And just in case you're wondering what assets I've used in this project, all the assets that you see visually are going to be linked down in the description below. So like I said, we've got our door that opens up here, and then we kind of move into another room. And so with the second room, it looks like we've got some data cables and stuff running around. So I might add some like little beeps and boops, real faint because it's just a small box on the wall. And so then from there, we move through our door again, and now we move into this larger area. And there's not a lot going on right off the bat, but we do have this control panel here. And as soon as we get in front of this control panel, it's going to activate. So we're going to need an activation sound. And what that activates is this tube that comes down, kind of sucks up this energy core, and then goes back up. So because we're on a spaceship, we want something futuristic. So I'm thinking some hydraulic sounds and maybe a whoosh of the core going up into the cylinder, and then obviously it raising back up. And from there, I do have a trigger box that's actually set up right in the middle of this circle that it triggers a sequence. And what that sequence is our door, our bay door there in the background to open up, and then you see a rocket ship kind of leaving, like people are abandoning the ship. And so we're going to need some larger door sounds, and we're going to need the engine kind of spooling up and taking off. From there, we've got yet another door. I want to add some variations to these doors so it doesn't just sound like the same door over and over again. And then we come in here, and our little elevator platform, I've got it triggered to the E key as well. And one of the great things that I do like about having games that you can play with is you can see all the variations, because in a game it's very non-linear compared to if you were doing sound for a movie. You just have to watch through the movie, and when that sound happens, that's the sound that happens. So for us, like I said, we've got the different doors, so we may need some door variations, and then the player can do different things as well in a game. So, typically, if this was the end of the level, we could hit the E key and the elevator would go up, and like I showed before, it would restart the level. But then what happens if somebody does what I just did? Does the elevator come back down? And it does. So then, we kind of need an elevator going up and an elevator coming down, because we don't know exactly what the player is going to do. From there might be a couple other sounds that we can kind of take a look at. I really think that's pretty much it, though. Like I said, this is super basic. I just wanted to give an example of kind of what my process is when it comes to grabbing games and making sound effects for it. So another cool thing about having the actual game files, if possible, is it really helps when it comes to making sound effects for animations, because you can see how long those animations take, and it really helps with your timing. So in this instance, the doors that open up, they're on a blueprint. So what we can do is we can actually go ahead and I'm going to browse over to the asset and pull up the blueprint for that asset. And inside we do have our timeline, which this timeline is what denotes how long it takes for that door to open and or close. So if we go ahead and double click on our timeline here, we can see that it actually takes 1 second. So whatever we do for our door sound, both opening and closing, we want that to be 1 second. Because if it doesn't fit in that time frame, the sound's not going to match up. It's going to look weird. And for our other door, all these doors are going to be the same. But then let's see here. So I've got a level sequence for the kind of tube thing that comes down. So we're gonna go ahead and open that up, and I'll drag this over to this window so you can see. And one of the cool things about the sequencer here in Unreal Engine is right now by default it's set by the number of frames, and we can see up here it's set to 30 frames per second. So we could do the math, or we can actually just drop down here and go show time as seconds. And so I'm actually going to drop this down. We're going to put this underneath our video here so you can kind of see what's happening, and I'll square up the camera angle a little better. And so if we drag our playhead here across, you can see the animation happen as I build it. And so if we take a look at what's happening here, I pieced this together with two kind of curved window assets to make the tube, and then we've got the energy core. So at 0 seconds, we've got the tube that comes down, and that takes 2 seconds for it to get from where it is to its first position. And then from there, there's a 1 second pause. And then it's only a half a second that it takes for our energy core to go up. There's another half second pause, and then 2 seconds for our tube then to return. So like I said, things like this are really great, you know, because you can time out the whole thing and see exactly what's happening as it's happening. And so then from there, I have another level sequence for our bay doors, which actually include the ship taking off. So if we come over here to our bay doors, I go ahead and move this back down, and I'll just go in here. Again, no grief about my lighting. I know it's not right. I'm not good at lighting in Unreal. So as we scrub through here, you know, we can see I've got two doors, which is this first bay door and then this second bay door. So the first bay door starts, and it takes 2 seconds for it to go up, but a half a second after it starts, this second bay door starts to go up. And once that bay door is almost all the way up, then we have some movement out of this ship. And so the ship kind of raises up and takes off. And then that's it. So the whole thing, it takes about, see here, just under 3.5 seconds, which with the ship taking off, you know, we can trail that out. So if we're a little over, that's not such a big deal there. But this level sequencer will definitely help us, you know, determining those sounds. The last movement that I have is our elevator. Let me go ahead and close that. And the elevator I have, I built a blueprint for this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this blueprint. And just like we did with the doors, I've got 2 seconds of it going up. After a half a second, there's another 2 seconds where it's coming back down. And typically right here at this 2 second point is when the player triggers. I'll show you. I've got a trigger box up here, and that is set to, right now it's just set to restart the level because I don't have anything built after it. But after that 2 second mark, the player is going to hit that trigger box, and then the rest of the sound doesn't matter. But should the player hop off the elevator, we do need the sound of it coming back down. So just to kind of recap, like I said, you know, it's great to have the actual game file so you can sit there and play. And this is where a lot of QA skills kind of come into play. You know, so you're not just running through the level, you're doing everything that the player can possibly do inside that game. And because I built this myself, you know, I kind of had a running list of the sounds that I wanted while I was creating it. But you don't always have that. So sometimes even a simple kind of level like this, where it's can be beat in 30 seconds and is just 4 rooms, I may spend still like a half hour, 45 minutes just going through everything with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that I didn't miss something that the player could do or couldn't do, and see what makes those sounds and what sound assets are needed. Now, if somebody hands me a project like this, I try as much as I possibly can to create the sounds from scratch, but for the sake of this video, we're going to be using all just library assets. because I'm not going to go through how I create the sounds for every single little thing. Otherwise, this video is going to be 10 hours long. So I'm just going to use library resources that I have access to. And for the sake of copyright claims, all the music I'm actually going to get from the YouTube library. All right, so the first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is music. And like I said, just to make sure that I don't get hit for any copyright claims on my videos, I'm going to be pulling all the music from YouTube's library. And the reason that I'm okay with pulling it from YouTube's library is because this game, or this level, isn't going to be something that gets published or anything. It's just for the sake of the YouTube video. So typically what I'll do, if I don't have a musician that can compose music for the game and I have to source, I'll just go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of assets, just trying to find something that fits. Typically I would have like my music list that I'm listening to open alongside either the game or a video of the game, or at least a picture of the game. And sometimes you might even get asked to start on a project before the game is even like playable. So you might have to look at concept art. You just want to go through and find something that matches what the game style is. And this is something that I covered in my Unreal Engine kind of music for menus video, where I showcased where, you know, certain types of music fit with certain genres, and if you flip them, then it can make things look and sound really weird, pull the player out of that immersion kind of experience. So I've actually already gone through hours of listening to different music, and I came up with three songs that I feel would kind of work for the game. And I'm not sure exactly which one I'm going to put in yet. That might be something that we decide on the live stream, which for details on that live stream, make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video, because that's when I'm going to be announcing when I'll be doing the live stream itself. And this one I'm pretty partial to, so I may just end up using that one. But regardless of whichever one we use, another thing that we want to consider is, instead of just having it play from start to end and then be done, we don't know how much time the player is going to spend in a level. So we need to actually make it loopable. We can get into making it dynamic so that different parts come in when you enter different rooms, but that's a subject for a whole nother video. For this one, we're just going to be looping it so that it seems continuous in playback for however long you spend in the level. So like I mentioned before, as I'm going through the game, or this even works for working in a movie, I'll create the list of all the different sounds that I need. And it's always a good idea to have some sort of pipeline in place that just really helps with organization. And so something that I like to do is I'll keep a list, and I like to do mine in Google Docs just because I can access it from anywhere. But I'll take this list and then I'll actually make a spreadsheet. That way I can keep track of when I have the asset, when it's been implemented, if I'm working on a shared workflow, a link to the asset. And that looks something like this. So it's just a spreadsheet for me to be able to keep track of the sound effects that we're using, whether or not we have the assets, whether they've been implemented. And you can create a pipeline that works for you and your project. For something simple, I really don't need a whole lot. I've got a list of the sound effects, and we need background music. And because I said that we were using all library stuff, I actually went ahead and already found all the assets that I need. Some of these I just need to edit out. Like I found the perfect footsteps, the jump sounds, the land sounds. So I'm not going to go into detail on editing those because it's just real boring clipping stuff out. For things like the ship movement, I'll show that here in a minute. But for the most part, it's real cut and dry. Just something to help you keep organized so you don't get in the middle of your project and go, Did I make that sound? Do I have that sound? Let me go look and see. You just have a spreadsheet. And because I do this on Google Docs, if I was working with somebody else, they would just be able to log on and go, oh, okay, so he's got these assets, but they haven't been put in the game yet. So like I said, I'm not going to show editing every single sound. Otherwise, this video is just going to be unreasonably long. But there are a couple different things that I want to highlight that I think you might find useful. And so I'm going to start off with working with our background music. And honestly, I could probably make an entire video just on looping music for your background music. So if that is something that you want to see, then go ahead and let me know in the comments. You know, I'd be more than happy to do a whole video focusing on editing music and looping music and stuff. But I'm not going to get too deep into it. I just kind of want to show off real quick kind of how I look at things. So to start off, what I do is I'll listen to the entire music file and I'll see if there's not just a defined good place for it to loop that the player's not really going to notice. Now, with Unreal Engine, there is a way to create a dynamic music system that changes based on kind of what the player is doing, how they're moving throughout the level, which if you play the new Doom that just came out, both Doom 2016 and the new one use this exact dynamic system for all of the music that Mick Gordon created for the game. But basically, I'll just go through a music file and see if I can't find a good looping point that also would be a good spot for the song to start when the player starts the level. And basically what I'm looking for is if there's something towards the beginning of the song that also happens later in the song, then that usually ends up being a great loop point. And for the song A Rising Wave, which I mentioned was kind of my top pick out of the 3 songs that I'd found, this actually has that. So for this particular song, we do have kind of an intro section, which if you're able to look at wave files and can kind of tell dynamically what's happening in the song, you'll be able to see that this is kind of the intro section. But about 16 seconds in, we have this kind of whoosh sound that like it whooshes in right into the transient. And if we listen to the whole file, which we're not going to do right here, but about, I think it's 3 minutes and 52-ish seconds, we hear that same whoosh into a transient. And so for me, if I cut right on the transients, I think that would make just a great loop. All right, so what I've done is I went ahead and I went to the transient that happens just after that initial whoosh, and then I went to the transient where it happens again later in the song. And I've cut out a nice clip that I think will loop pretty well. And we can actually tell if we go ahead and copy this and just paste it immediately after. I'll go ahead and zoom in here. And one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is when you clip, you want to make sure that you clip on a 0 crossing line, because then that could lead to just unwanted pops. So if we zoom back out here and just kind of listen to how this transitions back into itself, this is what we end up with. So you can hear it's real nice and clean. It's a great place. Like I said, we want to make sure that this area here starts the song and sounds good at the beginning of the level, but is also a good loop point. So I think this is going to be a really great loop to put into our game. All right, so for the next sound that I wanted to highlight, the bay doors opening and the ship taking off. And one of the cool things about knowing the animation length and the fact that it only happens once, we can kind of sound design this pretty linear, just like we would normally do for a film. So the first thing that I did was I took and consolidated just what we call a skeleton clip, and I made that 3.5 seconds because that's what our total animation is. And that way I kind of had a visual representation of what I needed to fit all of the sound effects into. And the second thing that I did, if I zoom in here, you can kind of see I actually placed markers, event markers, so that I knew exactly in the timeline of the animation where things were happening. And so what I did was I was actually able to kind of put in the door and the ship taking off, and I'm just going to integrate that all into one sound effect because it all happens in one place. It only happens once, and we know the specific amount of time that it happens. So the first thing that I wanted to do was I just took, I've got a couple door sounds here, and if we go ahead and play that. So that's the sound of just one of the doors. And what I did was, since they're both the same kind of door, and it's not something that you hear over and over and over again, like the doors that the player can walk through, I did go ahead and just duplicate it out. And for the doors that are further away, because they're further away and also kind of inside a corridor, all I did was bring the volume down quite a bit. So we end up with something like this. And because they're super close together, it's not a big deal. And with the ship, initially, like, I created an event marker for when the ship like started to lift off and then took off. But if I started the sound there, it sounded way too abrupt. So I thought about it for a second, and the ship, chances are, if whoever is piloting the ship ran through the door, got in the ship, they've already started the ship waiting on the doors to open. So I went ahead and started the ship sound right from the very beginning. And what I did was I created this fade in that you would hear from underneath the door as the door was opening. So after we're finished, let me unsolo these tracks. And this is what we end up with all together. So it blends really nicely together, it encapsulates the entire animation, and it lasts for the entire length. Alright guys, so that's going to wrap things up on this first part. As I mentioned, the first part is a video, the second part is going to be a live stream where we're going to implement all of these sounds into the level, directly into Unreal Engine without any middleware. And that live stream is going to take place on June 3rd at 2 p.m. So this coming Wednesday. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the notification bell. That way you get notified when I put videos up and when I go live. You can also join the Sound Effects Guy Discord channel. There will be a link to that below along with all the assets that I've used in the Unreal Engine project. Until next time.